Hello everybody, today we are going to be writing some game rules, or at least editing them. I've made some significant changes to one of my games, and I want to put these rules into play. So currently I have a description of the rules here, and this is how it looks in Firefox. As we've been testing this game, I've been really concerned that it's not been as interactive as I'd hoped, that players mostly just play for their own end and largely ignore everybody else, which is probably in my mind one of the cardinal sins of board games. I wanted to fix that, and I found a solution that really gets people talking, and so we've been playing and testing it out, and there've been some nice features of this change. Currently this is the description of the setup rules. And actually this is very long and awkward, and I've tried to get people to read this and understand it, and they never get it on the first try. So each player chooses a color: red, green, blue, or yellow. You separate the cards into groups by their backs, and then remove the right number of cards, and actually getting the right number of cards for each row written in the rules in a way that it's clear and undefined. Now this is reflected on both sides of the river, so that on the other side of the river there'll be the ones as well, and among those ones, 2 of them should be of each colour and the rest should be grey. The same's true for the 2s, but there are more of them, and for the 3s and 4s as well. And so describing this layout, I absolutely had to use the diagram in the end, but you do have to have the rules written formally as well. So the basic rule change that I'm going to be making today is I want to get rid of a starting setup and just have the river in the middle and the tiles that have tap on them touching the pipes, and everything else is placed. And let's try and write this down, but largely we really do not need anything that is currently in setup. Let's get rid of that and we'll try and explain. So selecting cards doesn't feel quite as important now, because actually it's a lot easier to select the cards. And we'll make this header 3, because I'm doing a lot of typos today. I've replaced the keyboard with an ergonomic one, getting RSI trouble, so I thought, so expect typos more than usual. So we need to sort the tile cards out, and the new rules are that basically we just separate them into their backs and remove the cards that aren't of the colors that are everybody's playing. Everybody chooses a tile color. Red, green, blue, or yellow. I'm actually adding 2 more colors. One of the other benefits of this is that we can actually make it 6-player if need be. And then we separate the cards into groups by their backs. I've called these ones tap now because they're right next to the taps to the river. And there is actually no cards anymore which are specifically designated goal card and placed up. They're now tucked into tiles 2 and 3. So we separate the cards into their groups by their backs, remove any. So we have to remove any cards that are not of the color that people are playing with. So everybody has chosen a color. Remove any cards. And this is kind of why I wanted to talk about rule writing and the challenges that this faces, because actually you feel like, oh yeah, you just say this, just say that, oh it's just obvious. But actually then you come to try and write them down and you're like, okay, but what do I exactly mean when I say remove any cards that... So actually maybe if I put out here, if there are not enough, if there are any colors left over. Remove all tiles of that color from the game. So we have already defined what tiles are somewhere up here. So I've got a land tile and a gold tile. Specifically define them. I could probably do with putting a circle with them here. So every tile is considered a piece of land. The color of the land tile shows who owns it. If someone buys that land, place a color counter on it. So we've specified what a land tile is here. So we probably need to use that term, land tile. Everyone chooses a color. From the available land tiles. If there are any colors left, remove all tiles. Let's put then so it feels more programmy. If there are any colors left, remove all tiles of those colors from the game. Now, one of the challenges I had was I used bank as the owner of land. So I had bank tiles and otherwise land tiles. And a lot of people found that was quite difficult in testing. So in my mind, the tiles that are still grey belong to the bank and you buy them from the bank. And the bank is just generically anyone not playing. NPCs, I guess. But oddly that was more confusion than it's worth, so I think I'm gonna swap bank tiles. So I've got land tile. So the bank, I've put the bank as the owner of all land not owned by any other player or holder of spare game money. It feels like an exception I'm going to have to write, keeping only the grey tiles and those, let's make it land tiles, just, it's one of those things, we want to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about. Let's put in here a word for unowned. So let's put this up by land tiles so that this actually makes some sense. An unowned tile. Tiles are grey. This means that they are not owned by any player, but can be bought for a set price. This is shown by placing a colored counter on the tile. Those of the chosen colors. Separate the cards into groups by their backs. So we've got tap 1, 2, 3, 4 and remove. No, I've done the remove, haven't I? Now here's my thinking. Oh, and shuffle them. Let's. So what's going to happen now is players are going to take it in turns and they're actually going to place the pieces on the board on their turn. With the exception of the tap cards. So I need to write this down more clearly. What I need them to do is to place a tap card next to the taps as shown in the diagram here. They also need to make sure that the leftovers are the grey tiles, right? So there are a couple of grey tap tiles. This needs a little bit of description, right? So let's say choose, place the river card. What did I call it at the beginning of this game? So I have an equipment thing. Let's try and stick to the description. Land tiles, straight. You know, I don't think I've even described it here. Let's put it here. One river tile. So this is a two-sided piece of card which will have, on one side it will have the 6 tap points, and on the other side it'll only have 4. Place the river tile in the middle of the let's use playing area, and place a tap tile of each playing color against each of the from the river. Yeah, from it. It's always difficult to make sure you know what you're talking about when you say it. All these things are always open for misinterpretation. So let's leave it as it, because that does still feel. Place a river tile in the middle of the playing area and place a tap tile of each playing color against each of the pipes coming out from it. Leftover spaces. Place any leftover pipe spaces, place an unowned grey tap tile. That's an awful lot of qualifiers there, isn't it? Okay, so in any of those left, all of these tap tiles are T-shaped, and the T's and the bottom of the T should be touching the river pipe. Now would be a good time to redraw the diagram. So I'm going to save this file under a different name, small layout.svg, and so now we saved that. We can get rid of most of these tiles. So we got tap tile there. All right, let's carry on with this. So we copy, paste. There we go. So I'm using Go formatting templates here. So here I need an image whose source is and res. Oh, I know. I can do it with a / there, but I actually was going to use join. Layout.svg. I'll have to test this, and then and if that's done correctly, we should find the image in the thing. So let's run. Well, it ran quickly, didn't complain. We're much further down. What have we got in this image place here? Oh, that should be config rel. And there we go, we have the image. No, we have layout. We don't have small layout because it's actually small layout And we're going to need to CSS that in some way. I thought I put some CSS at the top. Let's just put some lazy stuff in here. Image, max width, 90%. That should probably fix the size. So there we have the the image in, at least visibly. That's a start. Let's put something in italics underneath. In the above image, there are 3 players. Fourth pipe is covered by an unowned dial. This is actually changing as well, because I don't know who's going to go first at actually doing stuff. So give each player 5 money. How to play. Players take turns around the table to do each of the following. First, explore a tile. Second, perform any number of actions they can afford in any order. Buy land, rotate land. Finally, receive money. This is true, but one of the changes that I have made is you can't actually earn money during the first rounds until everybody has at least 4 tiles on the table. And this should happen more or less together, because in each set of cards, the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, there are the same number of tiles. We need an until all players have 4 tiles of 4. We'll make them land tiles of their color on the board. Players take it in turns to explore 1 land tile. After that, players take it in turns around the table to do each of the following. Player who probably worth putting something including the tap tile. Let's players may only explore let's just call that explore. May only explore the player who places I should probably emphasize the all as well, because that's kind of the point in this setup. Until all players have 4 land tiles of their color. I don't know whether that is completely clear. It's really difficult to get this stuff right. But we get to that stage, and at that point, sometimes it's easier to explain what you're doing if you explain why you do it, right? So what I want to do is explain that you give each player around the table 1 more money than the person to the left, to the right. So the player who goes first gets no bonus money. The person to his left gets 1 extra money as a kind of going second bonus. The person to his left gets 2 extra money. The person to his left gets 3 extra money, and so on and so forth. So going last is compensated. And so I can say, as I'm writing this, each player around the table gets 1 more money. I'm really tempted to write it. Every time I want to write something like this, I'm really tempted to write this in some kind of pseudo code. I can't. And so that's a challenge. So I'm going to kind of give a reason for this. As compensation for not going first, each player around the table. I did say take turns around the table, didn't I? Players take turns around the table. I'm going to put this in. Players take turns clockwise around the table. This isn't clear, is it? My challenge here is, do I put the normal action here at the beginning? Do I move this into setup? That might actually make more sense. Let's under how to play. That's a header 2, so we need a header 3 here. And we'll call it early game. And then we'll start. Players take turns around the table. Take the turns clockwise around the table to place. I've been calling it explore because it was revealing something that was already there, but we're going to place a tile. This might actually be the place to describe placing a tile. I did previously have it lower, right? It's the first thing you do, so players take it in turns clockwise around the table to do. So this is the big picture description, and then more detail on what each part actually means. And this is actually more complicated now than it used to be, because it used to be just flip it and carry on. Now you can actually put quite a bit more strategy in how you place the tiles. That's one of the changes and why I think this change is good. So we'll have another hash here, and we'll call it main game. So we've got the early game and then the main game, and that feels kind of derogatory to the first part of the game, which is very important and can be quite strategic now. I'm going to make this bold because it really feels like an action. Draw a tile from the lowest available pile and place it adjacent to a tile already on the board. Now, one of the challenges of doing this is actually, in some of our experiments, we found that some of the tiles will be your tiles, some of the tiles will be unowned tiles. And if you get your own tile, that could be quite a strong advantage. One of the countermeasures we put in was to say you can't place a tile next to a tile that is of the same color, so that you can't simply take an entire corner and not have to interact with anyone else. The other difficult rule to explain is that the tile needs to be somewhere that can be reached by only rotating the current tiles on the board. So currently the tiles look like this, and it's easy to get from this tile to this tile by just rotating this and this. But if, say for example, there's only these 3 yellow tiles on the board here, then this yellow tile is not reachable from this tile here, because this corner means that you can't get water from here to here. However, with this corner here, if later on a corner was added here and another corner here, then you could get to that again, or there would be other ways of making that path. But I did want to make sure you always had to place the tile so that it was theoretically possible to get it water only by rotating tiles. So this will probably need a diagram to describe what that means. The T's can be passed through in any direction, right? But the corners and the straights don't allow for corners, and the corners don't allow for straight throughs. So what if I put here, once all players for land tiles of their color on the board move to main game. This still doesn't feel right. It's like the order doesn't match here. I really want to give this a heading. Let's just do it in bold again. So, placing a dial. And we'll use bullet points here. So, you may not place it next to a tile. This is not true for bank tiles, so again another exception to try and squeeze in there. You may not place a colored land tile you may not place an owned land tile next to another tile of the same color. You must place the tile so that one of the biggest problems I have describing this is actually I haven't yet described what it means for a tile to have water, right? So maybe this needs to be, maybe I have described it. I've got it in the key terms. If a land tile that you own has a complete path from one of the river pipes to it, then it is considered irrigated. At the end of each turn, you receive 1 money for it. Now this might actually need to move higher up the ordering, but I know when people read the rules, you feel like this is one of the frustrations of game rule writing, is people don't want to read the whole rules. They just want to find the important bits. But all the bits are important. And so you got to highlight them and put a big red ring around some bits that are more important than others. And I don't know how many times I've taken people through the rules and they've just skipped over the key terms page because obviously they know how it works anyway. And the key terms are important because you're gonna need to understand what I'm talking about. It's part of why I try to highlight these words in some way or another. So, placing a tile. You must place the tile such that it can be connected to the river using only the tiles on the board. Only the tiles currently on the board. However, does not have to be connected right now. Again, this is going to be a place that I think it just can't avoid a diagram. However, it does not have to be connected right now. You may receive money from another player to help you decide where to place it. This has actually turned out to be one of the key parts of where the negotiation in this game happens, and it's far closer to what I was aiming for when I designed it in the first place, by having this ability to place the tile where you want to and receive money to do that. Draw a tile from the lowest numbered available pile and place it adjacent to a tile already on the board. And let's choose so that it is possible to connect to the river by rotating only the tiles currently on the board. So you must place the tile such that it is possible. Let's get rid of that comma. You must place the tile such that it is possible to connect to the river by rotating only the tiles currently on the board. However, it does not have to be connected right now. Let's highlight the master maze, because again, this is key for reading. When you're writing game rules, you try to write it in a specific language as you can, and may and must are very helpful keywords in actually putting the rules together. Let's compile this, see what we get. So we've still got the river pipe. So players take it clockwise around the table to place a tile. Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll put an until there. Until all players players taken in turns clockwise around the table to place a tile until all players have 4 tiles of their color on the board. From the one, and we'll put a quote around that one pile, until all players have 4 tiles of their color on the board. And then we can have another thing for ending the early game, I guess. Again, this doesn't feel quite right. On the turn that a player places the last player's fourth tile the player who placed that player will be able to play a complete turn. As compensation for not going first, each player around the table clockwise from first. Yeah. So that's that'll probably do the job. As compensation, each player around the table clockwise from that player receives one more money than the last. I feel like that's clear. I swear someone's going to read it wrong. As compensation, each player around the table clockwise from that player being the player placed the fourth tile, receives one more money than the last. In a two-player game, the other player receives 2 extra money. You must decide. You may receive money from another player to help you decide where to place it. Let's put negotiate. Now move. Oh yeah, this is. We've done the change. Let's convert. Let's refresh. So we've got the river. How to play. So here's the early game. Ending the early game. Placing a tile. So how to play. The early game gets a slightly bigger title. Players take turns clockwise around the table to place a tile from the one pile until all players have 4 tiles of their color on the board. Draw a tile from the lowest numbered available pile and place it adjacent to the tile already on the board. You must now place the tile such that it is possible to connect to the river by rotating only the tiles currently on the board. However, it does not have to be connected right now. You may not place an owned colored land tile next to another tile of the same color. Place a land tile. There's only really one exception. Now I know that during the early game there are no gold tiles, so again the question is, where do I put this next piece of information? The gold tiles are only in piles 2 and 3, so you get to them in the mid game, you get to put them down. So where do I put those rules? So I need to put it here, but kind of as an aside. But then people will think it's an aside and not think it's part of the rules, and it actually is part of the rules. And it's something that is definitely going to happen in every game. If the tile is a goal tile, must be placed diagonally from any other tile on. So that feels not helpful entirely there. Now let's put this as an aside. Let's put it in a let's tab it in note. I normally have treat it as code if I do this, so I have a thing I do with code. So now we've defined what placing a tile is. Let's call it place a land tile, and then it makes, then we can be so we get as far as placing a land tile. Draw a tile from the lowest numbered available pile and place it adjacent to a tile already on the board. You must place the tile such that it is only possible. I think that's correct. I've put this: if the tile is the goal tile, must be placed diagonally from other tiles on the board. This won't happen in the early game. And then we got first, you place a land tile as above. Perform any number of actions. So the actions are separate from placing a land tile. That's caused some confusion in trying to describe these rules. Finally, receive money for all the land tiles they own that are irrigated. So we can get rid of these details about exploring a tile. So now we need to describe the actions which come up in the main game. Buying a land tile. And the cost of land tiles has changed. And that will definitely need a diagram. So I'm going to end this video here. Hopefully you found it interesting. This has been a bit of the process of trying to write game rules and trying to make them consistent so that when people see them, they can see what's happening. Making sure that everything is clear, that the end conditions are clear, that everybody can see what they're trying to do. Perhaps after watching this, when you read a set of game rules, you'll have a bit more compassion on the poor sods that had to write them. Anyway, if you found this interesting and want to see me doing more writing games rules like this, do let me know. Whatever, my name is Matt Stoodley. This has been Story Feet Games Writing. I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.